All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Michaela Safarian Jenkins. I'm a global program manager at Qualtrics. Before we get started, I do have a few quick announcements. The session today will be recorded and shared via email with all those folks who registered. During the discussion, we would love to hear from you, as I kind of pointed out before, seeing where folks are tuning in from. And I see lots of cities coming through now, so I love to see it. So feel free to use that chat, right? If you have any messages, comments, or questions to the panelists or one another in there, and we will go ahead and monitor that throughout our webinar today. For those who do not know, Fairygodboss is the largest career community for women. So millions of women visit Fairygodboss for career connections, jobs, community advice, and virtual events like this one. And now I'm excited to kick off today's event on the first day of Black History Month, Black Business Leaders Advice for Women in the Workforce, which is sponsored by our company, Qualtrics. So we are joined today with 4 amazing leaders here at Qualtrics that I'm very excited that I get to work with: Lindsay, Becky, Eden, and Danielle. Would each of you take a minute just to introduce yourselves, a little bit about your experience at Qualtrics, and a little bit more about you? We'll start off with Lindsay.
Oh, I'm off mute. Perfect. Hey, y'all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I am Lindsay Johnson. I am the Senior DEI Program Manager here at Qualtrics. A little bit about my role: I have oversight of our inclusion programming, as well as our ERGs. We call them Q groups, and as well as our learning and development that is related to inclusion and focused on inclusion. I've been at Qualtrics 3 years. I'm based in Atlanta and just excited to be a part of the panel today. I'll pass it to Becky.
Thanks. So hi, everyone. I'm Becky Beard. I'm based in Dallas, Texas. I have been at Qualtrics for 4 years now. I lead the North American and Latin American proposals team at Qualtrics, which is a very technical role that I won't bore you all with. And I'm also happy to be here. Eden.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Eden Spencer. I am also based in our Dallas, Texas office, and I am a proposal specialist on Becky's team. I have been at Qualtrics for about 3.5 years, and I'm looking forward to many more, and I will pass it off to Danielle.
Perfect. Thanks, Eden. Hi, y'all. I'm Danielle. I am also based out of our Dallas, Texas office, enjoying the winter wonderland these past couple days, and I'm on our sales team. So I'm a sales development manager here at Qualtrics. I've been with Qualtrics for a little over 7 years, and I was an account executive for the first 6 or so of those years, and moved into leadership, working with salespeople getting started in their career, and loving it.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for the intros. Super excited about our discussion today. And just for those tuning in who might have missed it, as we kind of went through the intros, I spoke about this prior, but would like to just remind everyone that we are answering questions today that come from all of you directly. So please feel free to submit your questions on the chat on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll do our best to respond as many as we can as we go through the webinar today. So let's get started with the first question. I'm going to have everyone answer this question. We'd like to begin by asking how being a Black woman leader has shaped your career journey. And again, Lindsay, woman going first many times here, we'll have you go first with that question.
For me, I think that's a little bit of an easy answer. I think it informs everything in my career and everything that I've done. I think it's the lens with which I view myself, the world, my relationships. And I think growing up, I had a lot of great examples of Black women leaders, and maybe not in the traditional sense or in terms of their careers, because I think things like access and equity kind of played a part and were frequent barriers for a lot of women in my family. That said, they were leaders in their own right, in many ways, and I think it's an experience that informed my time as an academic, as a researcher. I was very much invested in investigating the stories and the narratives of women of color, particularly Black women in STEM. And I think it also is very much a part of the work that I'm doing right now as a practitioner and wanting to bring the stories and the nuances and the experiences and the challenges, the contributions of Black women and women of color forward. And so I think it's always a part of me. And I think it's always been very much an informant factor to the journey that I've led up until this point, as well as the journey that I'm currently on. So that's my answer in a nutshell. But I'll pass it to you, Becky. How about you?
Thanks. Wow, sorry. I didn't have many people to set an example for me professionally early on in my career. There just are not very many women or women of color in STEM or in tech or in the field of proposals. And by default, I sort of ended up kind of paving the way for myself. So who I am and how I present myself has changed dramatically over the years as I've kind of learned to negotiate this landscape and what it means for me to be a Black woman in leadership or a Black woman in tech or in proposals or in management. I often find that I have to prove myself when others are given a benefit of doubt that I don't have. And I've had to work on myself by not letting that bother me. So it's been a constant learning exercise for me personally. How about you, Danielle?
So I feel like I've always been driven to be a high achiever, even before I had the title of leader. But in school, in sports, in my community, different things I would try to do. I wanted to be seen as being excellent. And when I joined the working world, I realized that my perception as a Black woman sometimes led to people not thinking I could be as excellent as I knew I could be. And that inspired me to strive to work harder and prove my achievements, and make sure that the people I worked with knew that my skills and my achievements were undeniably excellent. And I think as a salesperson and now as a leader, that's what I strive to do. So I would say that's how it's informed the way I've navigated my career. Eden, what about you?
So for me, very similar to a few other responses, I personally, especially growing up and going through school and then college, I didn't have very many Black women leaders in my life. And so there weren't many people very close to me that I could kind of look to and be like, oh, I want to emulate you and be like you and follow your path. So when I was navigating college and figuring out what it is I wanted to study, and then even when I was out of college and out of my MBA program, trying to figure out where I wanted to go, everything kind of felt new to me. I didn't find too many spaces upon my initial job search of where I wanted to go and where I felt I would be the most comfortable and perform well. And it just was all very new to me. And I was like, well, I guess I have to kind of make my own way. But the flip side of that, as it's been, a fun journey so far, I'm still, fairly young for how far I feel like I've gone in life. And it's cool to be able to mentor people who were in my position a decade ago when they're starting in their first business classes in undergrad and everything. So it definitely has its pros and cons. But for me, just being able to pave a way for myself has been really instrumental in my development. And now I'll hand it back to Michaela.
Awesome. Thank you all. I love all those answers, specifically focusing on, how representation played a role in your personal journey into becoming leaders here, just in general and at Qualtrics. So along similar lines, what career advice do you have for Black women and all women of color who want to grow in their career, specifically in leadership? Is there anything you wish you knew when you were earlier on in your career? And I'll have everybody answer that one too. We'll start with Danielle.
Yeah, so advice that I would have for women looking to go into leadership, I would say two things. And the first would be to find a way to remind yourself that your value exists outside of your job. First and foremost, I think leadership, in my experience so far, I've learned it can be kind of lonely, and it's an entirely new way to see yourself as a failure. Like, leadership is an entirely different type of role, and it's a new way to be, for something to be that you're bad at, right? And we do tend to be hard on ourselves as women. So finding something outside of your job where you're finding your worth, your value, where you're not just putting it into how you succeed at work, it is the first thing I would recommend. Definitely, whether that's volunteer work or doing things with your family or pursuing something creative, whatever it is, find a way to remind yourself that you're valuable, you're worthwhile, you're purposeful outside of just your job. And then the second thing I would recommend to a woman who's looking to move into leadership would be to find a mentor. Find someone who has done what you're doing and is where you're trying to go in life, who can empathize with you and listen to you and provide advice. It'd be great if that woman is also a woman, or your mentor is also a woman. Doesn't have to be, but someone who can understand where you're coming from and provide that support and advice would be great. And that's what I would recommend to anyone trying to move into leadership as a woman. Becky, pass it off to you.
Thank you. So like I was saying earlier, expectations were and are very different, I find, in my experience, for me, than they may be for my colleagues. I've had to try my hardest to give everyone grace, and especially giving grace to myself. So I would say that I wish I understood that earlier on, specifically like giving myself and others grace and to be patient with others. So someone who is looking into getting into leadership, I would definitely suggest to work on yourself first and practice patience with yourself and others. Because the truth is, we're all just learning here. This is a very new situation for a lot of people, and a lot of companies are just stepping up in this situation where we have Black women in leadership, and it's new. Patience is kind of key to solving a lot of the problems that we encounter every day. How about you, Lindsay?
I love that. The patience and the grace. I would echo that 100%. I think I'll start with the second part of the question, like the things I wish I knew or would tell myself, or when I was early in my career. I think it's really about like doubt. Don't doubt yourself. You're qualified, if not more so than anyone else. I think every room that you're in, it is by design. And so you have a purpose there. You are supposed to be there. You can contribute there in that space. And so that's something that I would offer as advice. And then I also want to underscore what Danielle was mentioning around like mentor. I think it's critical and to have a network. And for me, it's been a constellation of mentors. It's been mentors who look like me, mentors who don't, various backgrounds, perspectives, men, women, what have you, various identities and communities represented within that network. So I think it's a constellation of folks that have been really helpful in terms of transitioning in my career and the many pivots that my career has taken, and particularly into this new aspect of leadership. And so I would recommend, a network as being supremely important as well. How about you, Eden?
For me, my career advice is very similar to what everyone has said prior to me. Starting with representation, I think it is very important to be at a company where you see yourself represented within leadership down to, the lowest levels and everything in between. I think that is super important, because to me that represents that the company knows that you are a valuable member of the company and they're willing to invest in you. Something that I would recommend people make sure to do within their career journey is to find a mentor. For me personally, my mentor is Lindsay, and she has been for about 2 years now. And just having her as a leader at Qualtrics and also as my mentor for several years now, it's helped me to expand my horizons as far as what I feel like I'm capable of. You know, if I'm ever struggling with a situation at work, Lindsay has always been there to kind of help guide me. And she was instrumental in my big career shift that I took this year into Becky's team, which I don't think I probably would have felt so encouraged to do without Lindsay encouraging me. So definitely having a mentor, I can attest to it personally changing my life and my career in the most positive way. And then just because you walk into a space and you don't see someone who looks like you or thinks like you, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't belong. I think it's quite the opposite, that you belong even more in that space because clearly there's a deficit and you're there to fill it. So I would also encourage people to push themselves into new spaces that they don't always see themselves, because you never know what will happen. And with that, I'll pass it back to Michaela.
Love that, Eden. Love to hear more about our internal mentorship going on here. I'm so happy everybody was able to chime in on this one. I just see so much value in having, you know, patience with yourself as well as others, and always remembering, right, you deserve to be in these spaces as Black women and just women of color. I think that's really important and something that everyone touched on. So I love to hear it. For Danielle and Lindsay, how would you describe your leadership style? And what's the number one thing you hope your direct reports are getting out of working with you? And I'll start with Danielle.
Yeah, I would say my leadership style, still learning, still developing, but right now I feel like it's a tightrope between empathy and accountability. So there are times when I'm working with people on my team, and I know that it's really important for me to lean into the empathy side of things, where I'm encouraging them to take time off, or sometimes we spend times in our one-on-one, like not talking about work at all. It's just, hey, tell me what's going on, or we practice breathing, whatever it is. And depending on the individual or the situation, sometimes between accountability and empathy, my role as a leader is to just be empathetic and to like reinforce the value that they have as individuals. And there are times when I know, based on the situation or the individual, where between empathy and accountability, it makes much more sense for me at that moment, or what they need from me is to really be, you know, pushing their productivity or holding them accountable for hitting their metrics or whatever it may be, making sure that they get to their goals from a professional standpoint. And some people naturally like need one more than the other. And again, it depends on the situation or their skill level or how motivated they are that moment. It's a constant tightrope between balancing those two things, recognizing your inherent value and wanting to show care, and also recognizing there are places that you want to go that I want to help you get to by holding you accountable to doing the work to get there. And if the second part was, what do I hope my direct reports get out of working with me? My goal would be for everyone to know when they open their computer in the morning, when they shut their laptop at night, they know that like somebody cares about them. And that would really be the ultimate thing I hope that everyone gets, that you can work at a place where you're genuinely cared for and be just as successful as anywhere else. Lindsay, what would you say?
That's so tough to follow. Like, I feel like I would say all of that. That's it. I really haven't tried to think about like how I would call my leadership style or categorize it, but I think I would echo a similar sentiment around empathy. I think I lead from a place of serving others and service to others. I think ultimately if I think about my days and when I approach like my one-on-ones with my Q group leaders or any other meeting, I just try to show up and see people for the wholeness and the fullness of who they are. And sometimes that means we go into meetings and we're very productive and we get stuff done. And other times that means we don't, we take time to deal with, what is and what makes us whole beings and human beings. And so I'm okay with that. I feel like it's a balance. I feel like that's fine. We can get to the work. We will be productive. We'll get those things done. I love the tightrope that Danielle is describing. I think that's a perfect analogy. But I think I just lead from trying to see others. And I also think like what I would hope that my Q group leaders or other folks that I'm accountable for think of me or take from me. I think it's advocacy. And I would hope that they, of course, know that I care, very similar to Danielle, but also that I will advocate to the best of my ability for their betterment in all things, whether that's at Qualtrics, outside of Qualtrics. So that's what I would hope they would say.
Thank you both. I loved those two answers. I think that's really important how you both acknowledge, right, the balance between being a leader and how you kind of motivate your employees, as well as, hold them accountable and also are empathetic. I think I just really love those two answers. I thought that was fantastic. Along with that, for Becky and Danielle, how has your day-to-day work changed since you went into leadership at Qualtrics? And how has your overall approach to work changed at all? And before we jump into that question, just throwing a reminder out there, we will be answering questions. So if y'all have any questions who are watching, feel free to put them in the chat. So I'll repeat the question. How has your day-to-day work changed since you went into leadership at Qualtrics? Has your overall approach to work changed at all? And I'll start off with Becky.
Yeah. So, I mean, simply everything has changed since I moved into my leadership role, from my day-to-day to my overall approach. I'm to the point where I can't make a decision without it immediately impacting a fairly large group of people. And as far as an approach, I've had to learn how to think for a group instead of independently. I personally speak on behalf of 15 just incredible people, not just myself. Leading them and working on their behalf has greatly impacted everything I do every single day, every single moment. When I was in IC, I made every decision with my career in mind. There was very little I did without first thinking, am I going to be able to promote if I do this? And now I first think of how this decision is going to impact the day-to-day of those who I lead. And then I think, how will it impact their careers? And then only later, if I have time or emotional bandwidth, that I will briefly consider how I'm personally impacted. My team has just become my number one priority in everything I do. What do you think about this, Danielle?
No, definitely on par with what you just said. I started out as an account executive, so I sold. That was my job. So moving into leadership, my day-to-day has changed drastically. I have to be far more intentional about taking care of my mental state, my emotional state. What Becky said about having the emotional bandwidth, absolutely. This role, love it. It's definitely far more emotionally draining than just being an individual contributor. When my job was to sell to companies, sometimes I could kind of phone it in, right? Been doing it a while. I knew the questions to ask. I knew how to walk through the software. But my job now is to genuinely care for people, all very different people in different situations. And the getting on calls and knowing I have to show up fully myself, but also be a little bit of a different version of myself for the person I'm having my one-on-one or my coaching session with, that can be emotionally taxing. So I'm far more intentional about making sure I'm working out, I'm drinking water, I'm getting good sleep, I'm practicing positive thought processes, all these different things that I didn't necessarily have to prioritize all the time as a salesperson, knowing that my team relies on me being at my best, and I have to do that. So there's also, for my day-to-day, there's a lot more meetings as a leader, and I spend a lot more time digging through reports. So as an account executive, I was definitely more of a storyteller. casting the vision of how your business will be changed when you buy my software. And now I'm more of like a story finder, like going through data and trying to glean insights on how to improve for my team or for an individual based on what the data is telling me. So a lot more of that in my job as well. So yeah, that's what I'd say.
Love those two answers. I think, right, having self-care be a part of that routine, as well as, taking care of others in your role as a leader. We are going to take a question from the audience. So let me go ahead and find one here. And it's actually somewhat related. The first question I'm going to have us answer, and let's have everybody answer this one. I think it's a good one. Has anyone navigated avoiding burnout when Black women are expected to be excellent at all times? So I'll repeat it again. Has anyone navigated avoiding burnout when Black women are expected to be excellent at all times? If anyone has an answer for that one.
I can start and take this one. I don't know if I've avoided burnout, but I think I have been in situations in the past over my career where I have had managers who have acknowledged my burnout and kind of let me step back, especially I think of all of like the social justice issues that took over in the summer of 2020 and how that was like a super taxing time to be an African American in corporate. And at that time, my manager let me take a backseat to a lot of things just because I didn't feel like I could fully focus on any type of work during those trying times. And so I guess I didn't avoid it, but I had someone who was on my side who kind of helped take things off my plate so that I could just focus on my mental health during those times.
I can add on to that. I also am going to point back to 2020 just because that was such a hard year for us as a community. And I personally was greatly impacted. And I did something similar after everything happened. I reached out to my leadership and was like, I can't function. Like, I cannot operate in any space right now, and you don't want me to anyway. So like I don't trust myself to work and feeling the way I'm feeling, and like this is not, I don't even know if that was burnout, but like I've never experienced anything like that in my working history where I just could not get out of bed, could not operate. So I took off 2 weeks from work. And for me, it was an amazing time. I took my family to California. We sat on the beach. I deleted all social media. I would probably say it was the only time in my career I deleted Slack and my email from my phone. I should do it more often. People encourage me and I don't. But I deleted all social media. I deleted all contact with work for 2 weeks. I hiked. I kind of found my center and was able to kind of come back. I wouldn't say refreshed, but I at least was able to gather my perspective. And it was, like the support I had from my leadership that was like asking no questions, of like, absolutely do whatever you need to do, check in and let us know if there's anything we can do. That was super supportive. But I would say find the things that make you happy and do that when you need to ground yourself and surround yourself with your community.
I second that. I took time as well. I very intentionally took time. So I think it's a habit around intention. And I think the way you show up for work and all the things that you're meant to do here, you also have to be very intentional about taking care of yourself, like with a similar level of being deliberate about that. I took a couple weeks acknowledging that I needed and could not work, and also had the benefit of not just a leader, but a team that said, we'll fill in the gap. And so I was able to do that. I also think it was realizing, me personally, that it's not just up to me to solve for some of the things that we're facing. In fact, some of this stuff I shouldn't even be solving because it's not my problem solely. the Black woman. So it's like we carry that burden of wanting to do the work and also being the most impacted while doing the work. And so that's hard. And so I think being able to rely on, just as Becky said and Eden said, like we had support from leadership and support from my team really at the time to take the time. So I don't know if I avoided burnout, but I think it's something you balance and try to navigate as things occur. But I think it's a habit of taking care of yourself and being very intentional about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would be echoing what's been said. Communicating to your leader that you're feeling these feelings. It's normal. We're human beings. We get tired. Communicating that and then setting boundaries for yourself. I love what Becky said about like deleting like Slack and Gmail from her phone. Absolutely. Set your work boundaries. You work from, whether it's from 8 a.m. to 11:30, you take lunch for an hour, and then from 11:30 to 5, whatever it is for you. Outside of those hours, you're not checking your email. You're not getting on Slack. You're not answering questions from even your boss, right? Like setting very clear boundaries. Like your job is not you. And I feel like that's sometimes what burnout indicates is you're taking on too much of like your identity in your job and it's not going well, or you're too tired. I don't know. That's what I think about that, but definitely setting boundaries. And the last thing I would say is create a goal for yourself, like a challenging goal outside of your job, so that when you set those boundaries, you're more inspired to like use the energy that you have. Hopefully you have a little bit more left over if you're setting boundaries to do something else. Like maybe you decrease your mile time by 10 seconds, or your goal is to, I don't know, start a small business, whatever it is, but set some kind of challenging goal. So when the work is done, like your mind like goes to, all right, let me go do this other thing that matters to me. That's what I would recommend. And what was already said by my lovely co-panelists is making sure you're communicating and setting space for yourself, because burnout is real and we want to avoid that.
Definitely. I loved all those answers because burnout is real. And I love to hear that self-care is a part of everyone's journey and taking care of themselves, as well as just finding boundaries right at work and finding what works best for you all. So thank you all for answering that question. We do have some other questions coming through, so feel free to keep asking them and we will try to get to them towards the end of the webinar today. We do have a question that's more focused on self-care or some work outside of the profession, and I'm going to have Eden and Lindsay answer this one. How do you focus on yourself and your personal life and mental well-being when you're outside of work? And let's start with Eden.
Yeah. So the best way that I do it is maybe like a year or so ago, I made the effort or the decision not to have Slack or my work email on my phone anymore. I didn't like being reachable 100% of the time. It just made me uncomfortable that people would like expect responses from me outside of my working hours. So I don't have those on my phone. So if I'm away from my laptop, I am physically away from my job. Something else is making time, even if sometimes on the weekends I want to stay inside and I don't want to go anywhere or do anything just because I'm so tired of having to be social, is putting in the effort to do things that I do enjoy doing, such as cooking. I like to exercise. And then sometimes I am a little lazy and I just sit on the couch and I watch TV. But kind of whatever I'm in the mood to do, I let myself do it. And I try my best to kind of block out anything else that doesn't have to do with me taking care of my mental health in that time. And fortunately, working at Qualtrics, they have given us this wonderful wellness benefit that allows us to emphasize our health in any way we see fit, whether it's going to get a massage or a facial, or even something like getting a gym membership, which is what I do. So I love that I work at a company that has put an emphasis on mental and physical well-being and also gives us the space to be able to partake in that. What about you, Lindsay?
I love that. I think for me, it kind of goes back to what I was mentioning before around like just being intentional and taking care of yourself and all the many myriad of ways and things, right, that means. I agree very much with Eden in terms of like the boundary setting and taking things off your phone and just not being accessible all the time is big. I think, and I say that as someone who not necessarily has it all figured out or has mastered that. I say that as someone who is still practicing and trying to find that balance. And so things that I like to do that I find restorative is like time with my village, like my family, my friends. That is particularly always recharging and restorative in many ways. I think another big thing for me recently, I've been more regular with things like fitness and physical care and things like that, but I think integrating like mental and spiritual care, so therapy, has been big for me of late, and not doing it ad hoc when something happens, but making it very much an integral part of how I take care of myself, similar to right the physical aspect and what I do for fitness and exercise and things like that. I think just making sure it's fully integrated into how I care for myself. Other things like Eden mentioned, eating, traveling, just getting away, doing the things that give you pleasure or bring you joy, is a big part of how I tend to myself outside of work. So yeah.
Fantastic. Love those answers, and love how both Eden and Lindsay, how you pointed out, like being intentional with this time, right? Around self-care. I feel like that's so important. And I really love the idea of not having Slack on your phone. I see some folks in the channel or on the chat kind of resonating with that and how that's been really helpful for them in their journey. Next question is in terms of career, Becky and Danielle, what career move have you made that you have been most proud of? So what career move have you made that you've been most proud of? And Becky, I will start with you.
Probably, well, not probably, absolutely. Moving from being an independent person, like contributor to leadership. I never thought I'd be a leader. I never thought I'd be a good leader. I remember we do something here called career action plans with my first leader here. And I don't think we ever discussed leadership in my first year or so here. But that did happen. And I didn't think anyone would trust me with that responsibility. And maybe that is kind of linked back to never really having Black women leadership in my orbit. So maybe on some level, I just didn't even think it was like a possibility. But now I'm just endlessly thankful that I've been allowed to lead my team, and I've been handed this incredible group of people, and I'm proud of myself for stepping up. And when the call came down, I didn't like second guess it. I was just like, okay, this is who I am now. And it's been a learning process, and I'm very lucky that my team has been very patient while I'm like figuring what this means out for all of us and like who I am as a leader. My team has been endlessly gracious with me and like understanding of all of this, but I'm proud of myself. I'm proud of my company for entrusting me and kind of breaking the way for this to be a possibility. It's just been very cool. Danielle, how about you?
I would say I'm kind of proud of, or maybe most proud of, the decisions or career moves that I didn't make. I think in sales, there's like a tendency to always be chasing like the the shiniest thing, the best title, the role with the most clout. And I've had opportunities to do that in my career, multiple opportunities to work on the teams with that had the most prestige, work the biggest accounts. And I chose not to multiple times, where instead of making a decision just based on wanting to look good or have a great title or get more status or again, more clout in the company, I made decisions based on what I knew I wanted to develop, based on knowing I had a mentor that I wanted to learn more from, or based on wanting to know I'm going into a space that I feel like is best for my career development and what I'm trying to learn. There's a lot of people in sales who might not do that, where it's like, if I want to go for the shiniest thing, the thing that makes me look the best. And I've had people question that multiple times. And I'm proud of the fact that I didn't. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Becky, and thank you, Danielle. We do have a handful of questions coming through in the chat, so excited to get to those. But first, this one is going to be for everyone. So Fairygodboss has a tradition of asking its panelists this question, so we would love to continue the tradition. Fairygodboss has observed that women do not feel comfortable enough like bragging or taking ownership of all of the amazing things, right, that they achieve. We'd love to hear from each and every one of you. Personal or professional, what you are most proud of. And I'll start with Lindsay.
I think for me, it's being a first generation female in my family to get a college degree, and then to not only get a college degree, but to pursue my PhD, which without really a role model to do that. I'm really personally proud of that and the support that I received along the way. And another thing I'm proud of is just being able to take care of my mom. So that's very personal and dear to me as well. So yeah, I'll pass it to Eden.
For me personally, I got up in 2021 and moved myself from North Carolina to Texas all by myself. So I think that's pretty cool. And then something else is I did the 4+1 in undergrad. So I got my bachelor's and then I went straight into my MBA, did that for a year also while studying abroad in Australia for 2 weeks. So I think just compacting my education into such a short time frame is something that I'm super proud that I was able to do. What about you, Becky?
Yeah, so this is a longer conversation, but I went from being a teenage mom and a high school dropout to a professional and a leader with multiple degrees. At one point in my life, I thought my life was over. I thought I'd ruined it, and I didn't. I'm actually better off than I think I would have been had all this life not happened to me. So yeah, I'm super proud of that. What about you, Danielle?
I love this question because it's like challenging me even now. So I remember doing the math multiple times to make sure it was right. But in my career as a corporate account executive in the Dallas office, the South Market, which is what we sell into, I was the most billingest rep during my tenure as a corporate account executive at that time. It's been a while, so I'm sure someone's passed me now. But I think recognizing that, and sometimes we all have imposter syndrome, particularly I feel like Black women, and being like, technically somewhere out there you could call me number one. Probably not anymore, but that is something I'm like really proud of. Like, I sold more Qualtrics than anyone else, like even when controlling for the time that I was there as a corporate account executive. And that's something I am. That's something I should probably brag about more.
You're number one in my book. Sorry, I was on mute.
Love that. I love hearing about all y'all's accomplishments. Y'all are inspiration and folks are loving it in the chat. So love to see that as well. We are going to take some questions from folks, and I'm going to have everybody answer the questions because I want to hear from all of you. We'll get started with, let's see, one here. It's fine. Find one that's going to go first. Okay. From India, does the panel feel that for Black women, there is more of a pushback moving into leadership when you don't have a graduate degree? Has your education taken you into rooms that experience and connections could not? And I'll let anyone unmute and start with that one. It's a tough one. I'll repeat it. Does the panel feel that for Black women, there's more of a pushback moving into leadership when you don't have a graduate degree? And has your education taken you into rooms that experience and connections could not?
I don't have a graduate degree. And I've made my way into rooms that yesterday I was talking to another Black woman leader at the company. I was like, I've checked to make sure I'm supposed to actually literally be on this call several times because it feels like very adult in here, and I don't know if that's me. So yeah, like I would never say, don't let your education hold you back. Like you are put where you deserve to be put. Like I wouldn't say it has anything necessarily to do with your educational status. However, I will point out that Lindsay has a PhD, and I would love to hear her thoughts on this.
I'm on the spot. I echo that. I mean, I don't think it should be a barrier to leadership. I think we kind of got to recognize a little bit of the elephant in the room. I feel like for Black women, we sometimes have to be doubly qualified to get right half as far as some of our counterparts and or colleagues, and so that's a reality. But at the same time, I don't think it should be something that keeps you from going after the things that you want to do and the things that you know you can contribute. You add value regardless of your education. And I pursued my degree because it was required for my field. And I knew for the work that I wanted to do that I needed it. I spent some time in academia, and there was just no way to do that without having a PhD. And so I think you kind of got to judge each case and situation on its own merit. And so your individual journey is your own. And I would, I don't know, I would be open to, or I would suggest you be open to, you know, the path that you're on and the path that sort of life takes you, and not be limited by education. But if it's something that you know you require, such as myself, then absolutely pursue it with as much rigor as you can to get to where you want to be. So hopefully that helps. Anyone else have thoughts? Eden, Danielle, y'all want to go next?
Can you repeat the question? I just to make sure I answer it, the whole part of it.
Yeah, of course. And let me find it here. There's lots of questions coming through, so I love to see it. Oh my gosh, I'm having a hard time finding it now. I think it got unpinned, but it was around asking, like, for example, if you are like a leader, right? You're a leader. I'm trying to find it. Here we go. Okay. There we go. Does the panel feel that for Black women, there is more of a pushback moving into leadership when you don't have a graduate degree? And then has your education taken you into rooms and experience that connections could not?
Speaking candidly, I feel like if there's pushback that you're getting from moving into like any position, we'll just say in this case because your leadership, because you don't have a graduate degree. If there are other leaders that don't have graduate degrees, then like that's not the reason, right? So like I don't think that not having a graduate degree precludes you from being able to lead a team, to be empathetic, to listen well, to be strategic. So I feel like if that's happening, it's probably not just because of the degree. There's likely other things at play that we all have experienced. And I do feel like in my case, my degree has helped me get into rooms, but it was likely because of the connections that my degree kind of implies. So, but I don't necessarily think that experience can't teach you what having a degree can, particularly when it comes to the skills that you have to exhibit when you're leading a team. Like the different things that we've talked about here, you don't necessarily learn just by having a degree. I absolutely think it's important, but I do feel like if you're running into barriers and it's like, oh, because of your degree, but there are people who don't look like you who are in that space and don't have degrees, and that's like not the issue. And when I have heard of that happening, it's usually more of that case than it's actually the degree itself. So I hope that answers that question adequately.
I'll say for myself, with just my limited experience, having an MBA when I was in my job search helped me get my first position at Qualtrics, and the recruiter was just like super honest about it. She was like, it just looked like I kind of like had a vision of where I wanted to go in life. And also kind of similar to Lindsay, my like halfway through my MBA, I didn't change it, but I kind of changed what I wanted to eventually end up doing career-wise. So my initial path, I was going to go beyond getting a graduate degree because like Lindsay said, it was required. But then when in my mind, I kind of changed what I wanted to do job-wise, I realized that I could just kind of stop at an MBA. So it helped me get my initial job, but like everyone else has kind of said, I don't think it's something that should stop you from getting any type of role. And if not having a graduate degree is what stops you, despite having a full resume full of great experience, I think that just means that that company might not be the right place for you.
Totally agree, Eden, and love all of those answers. We have some really awesome questions in the chat. I did see someone say, oh, we didn't get to hear about Michaela's bragging moment. I will have my bragging moment for the sake of, following tradition. I think one of the moments I'm most proud of is how many products I've been able to help ship at Qualtrics. Being able to integrate our customer voice back into our products has made huge adjustments to some major updates that I think I'm really proud of. And I'm also very proud of being able to be a mentee through Qualtrics as well. I've had my mentees get roles at NASA, one at Qualtrics, and hopefully more in the future. So I think that's something I'm also very proud of outside of my main core duties. And then the next question that I think I'm going to have everyone answer as well is from here we go. How do you deal with adversity in the workplace? And how do you have difficult conversations to advocate for yourself in these spaces? It's a hardball question. I feel like it's a really good one, though.
I think I can start with the second half is like, how do you advocate for yourself? And can you say it again? I just want to make sure I answer the right way. I think I have an answer. I just want to make sure I answer it the right way.
Yeah, of course. So how do you deal with adversity in the workplace, and how do you have difficult conversations to advocate for yourself in these spaces? So how do you deal with adversity, and then how do you advocate for yourself in those situations?
So I think I'll start with the first part, dealing with adversity, depending on what it is. I think pausing, inserting a pause in whatever it might be, to like take a breath, collect your thoughts. And I always try to, when I get really irritated with something at work, try and think of, okay, this is clearly coming from something, from somewhere. The person that I may be having a conflict with, what is their perspective on this? Even if I like don't agree with it, but like clearly they're not considering themselves to be like their behaviors to be inappropriate for a reason. So like, what is their perspective? And then try and like kind of put myself in their shoes. As far as dealing with adversity, depending on what it is, like starting from a place of, okay, I could be wrong too, even though you're not wrong, but you could be if you're like had a different perspective. And then coming with, when you're dealing with any kind of conflict, after like inserting that pause and trying to see from someone else's perspective, is collecting whatever like data you might have about whatever the situation is. If you're having a conflict, like a deal dispute or whatever it may be, having like everything written. If it's the adversity you're facing is like an interaction with another person, like having some type of written record of what's going on. So if it comes to you're having to bring it to your manager, or bring it to HR, or whatever it might be, like you have data that exists outside of just like your emotional response to something. So when you're talking about it or discussing it, it's not just coming off as like angry or emotional, but like here's the facts, here's what happened. Yeah, I feel like that question, adversity, could mean many different things. I took it down to like having like an interpersonal conflict or with an individual, but there's different ways you can handle that. But that's what I would recommend if it's that type of interpersonal conflict or adversity.
I'll chime in. So as a leader, I find that we get two different types of adversity, or maybe just like challenging conversations. And one could be because my team sits in a support function, the people we support, there could be some sort of friction there. But also as a leader, and because Qualtrics values feedback, I'm often given feedback from the people I lead, and those can be challenging conversations too. And I kind of want to go back to what Danielle said, and like taking a beat is so important. And if it's like a live conversation where you're actually talking to someone, I've gotten kind of good at skirting things because I know myself and I know I'll have an emotional response. And then I try to acknowledge what they're saying, no matter where it's coming from, whether it's coming from my team or from someone else in the company or whatever that may be. Try to skirt it. And so I have time to process one by myself. And then I'm a big think tanker. Like, I don't even think that's a way to put it, but like, I like to reach out to people that I know and trust and say, this happened. What do you think? I have leaders on my team that I hit all day with. Hey, this happened. I said this is what was said. What do you think? Or if it's more higher level things, I know I can always go to my manager. This happened. What do we think about this? Not necessarily I'm always going to do what everyone else is saying, but like it gives me the opportunity to really think about it more broadly and get away from having these immediate emotional responses. I also lean heavily on my husband, who I talk almost everything through with him, just to kind of like bounce ideas off the walls and just to make sure I'm not, I would say, because the expectations from us are higher. I don't want to respond to things emotionally. And that I think as a human, that is our immediate like instinct, is to respond emotionally. But I try to take it to the next level and really pause and talk with other people, feel things out before actually responding, and then being able to respond in a most often written format to make sure that it's documented.
Love that, Becky and Danielle. Great advice for kind of how you can deal with adversity and how you can deal with it. Kind of thinking it through on your own. And I know we're coming short on time, so we're going to jump into our lightning round. We'll start with Becky. Back to you. What advice would you give your younger self?
Hang in there. Trust your instincts. They will never let you down. They haven't yet. And also, you are enough. What about you, Eden?
I think my advice would be to build relationships. I just feel like by being a kind person and just being like friendly and open, it has opened a lot of doors for me that I don't think I would have ever considered going through, just because I was friends with someone or because we had a conversation that sparked some interest or an idea. So definitely don't skip out on just talking to as many people as you can. What about you, Danielle?
Advice for my younger self would be just like to give yourself grace and know that it's okay to fail, and no one has everything figured out, even if they look like they do. Nobody has it all together, and it's okay to question things as you go along and be okay with failing. It'll work out. Lindsay, what would you say?
Mine would be to live on your own terms. Do your best not to cause hurt or harm, but live life as you see fit.
Love it. Perfect way to end. I love all of those gems. So thank you so much, Lindsay, Becky, and Eden, and Danielle for joining us today and for sharing just such fantastic advice. I know I learned something today, so I'm super excited for folks to kind of think this through a little bit more and get to share it with other folks who registered for this session. And thank you all just for folks who tuned in live. I'm super excited to see all the folks chiming in the chat, and just want to say thank you again. As a reminder, we'll be sending out a recording of today's event along with resources to learn more about opportunities at Qualtrics. And in the meantime, be sure to check out Qualtrics profile jobs on Fairygodboss. Also, we'd love to hear feedback from you. So please help us improve for future events. Please head over to the type form, which I believe was sent in the chat. And on the right-hand side of the screen, just to share your thoughts in a quick 1-minute survey. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and just thank you.